From Nobel laureate to global pariah, how the world got Abiy Ahmed and Ethiopia so wrong. It was July 2018, just 3 months after Abiy Ahmed had been appointed leader of Africa's second most populous country, and his star was rising both at home and abroad. Excitement was surging into an almost religious fervor around the young politician, who promised to bring peace, prosperity and reconciliation to a troubled corner of Africa and a nation on the brink of crisis. The Ethiopian diplomat has known the Prime Minister for almost 20 years, forging a friendship when he worked for the governing coalition's communications team and, later, as CEO of 2 state-run news organizations, while Abiy was in military intelligence and then heading Ethiopia's cybersecurity agency, INSA. Before working for Ethiopia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kidane Maryam ran the country's national broadcaster, the EBC, and he said Abiy sat on its board of directors. In 2018, Kidane Maryam was serving as Ethiopia's consul general in Los Angeles and said he helped organize Abiy's visit. When Kidane Maryam, who is from Ethiopia's northern Tigray region, approached the dais to introduce his longtime friend and colleague to the crowd, he said he was greeted with heckles from members of the audience. "Get out of the podium, Tigrayan. Get out of the podium, Warane," and other ethnic slurs. He expected Abiy, who preached a political philosophy of inclusion, to chide the crowd, but he said nothing. Later, over lunch, when Kidane Maryam asked why, he said Abiy told him there was nothing to correct. One of the ironies of a prime minister who came to office promising unity is that he has deliberately exacerbated hatred between different groups. Kidane Maryam wrote in an open letter in March, announcing that he was quitting his post as the deputy chief of mission at the Ethiopian embassy in Washington, D.C., in protest over Abiy's months-long war in Tigray, which has spurred a refugee crisis, atrocities and famine. By the way, he added, the problem is not only for Tigrayans. It's for all Ethiopians. Everybody is suffering everywhere. The epitome of hell. Much has changed since Abiy accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in November 2019, telling an audience in Oslo, Norway, that war is the epitome of hell. In less than 2 years, Abiy has gone from darling of the international community to pariah, condemned for his role in presiding over a protracted civil war that, by many accounts, bears the hallmarks of genocide and has the potential to destabilize the wider Horn of Africa region. The 45-year-old's fall from grace has confounded many observers, who wonder how they could have gotten him so wrong. But diplomats, analysts, independent Ethiopian journalists, acquaintances and others who have followed his career closely say that even at the height of Abiy mania there were warning signs. The war in Tigray is not the first time he's used that pass, she said, adding that since Abiy came to power on the platform of unifying Ethiopia's people and in its state, he has ruthlessly consolidated control and alienated critical regional players. Abiy's appointment had been intended to quell tensions. Instead, his drive for a new pan-Ethiopian political party sparked fears in some regions that the country's federal system, which guarantees significant autonomy to ethnically defined states, such as Tigray, was under threat. The Tigrayans weren't the only ones who were worried. In Abiy's home region, Oromia, and other administrative zones, people began to demand self-rule. Soon, the government began backsliding into the authoritarian practices Abiy had once renounced. Violent crackdowns on protesters, the jailing of journalists and opposition politicians, and twice postponing elections. Ahmed Solomon, a research fellow at Chatham House and an expert on the Horn of Africa, said Abiy's reform plan also increased expectations among constituencies with conflicting agendas, further heightening tensions. Abiy and his government have rightly been blamed for implementing uneven reforms and for insecurity increasing throughout the country, but to an extent, some of that was inherited. These simmering ethnic and political divisions that exist in the country have very deep roots, he said. Tensions reached a boiling point last September, when the Tigrayans defied Abiy by holding a vote which had been delayed due to the pandemic, setting off a tit-for-tat series of recriminations that spilled into open conflict in November 2020. A monumental failure of analysis. Lots of people were hopeful that the liberalizing changes, after those years of anti-government protests and all of the state violence in response, marked a moment where Ethiopia would start to conduct its politics more peacefully. But that thinking glossed over some of the major problems and contradictions in Ethiopia, said William Davidson, senior Ethiopia analyst with the International Crisis Group. There was always a massive challenge ahead for Abiy, and for everyone. Just the promise of a more pluralistic political system did nothing necessarily to resolve the clashing nationalisms, opposing visions, and bitter political rivalries. As the tide of international opinion has turned against Abiy, the Prime Minister's office has maintained he is not concerned about his deteriorating reputation. His supporters have increasingly blamed the West for the crisis unfolding in the country. The Prime Minister need not be a darling of the West, East, South or North, Abiy's spokeswoman Beline Siam told reporters in June. It is sufficient that he stands for the people of Ethiopia and the development of the nation. But it is difficult to reconcile the government's narrative with reality. Setting to one side the staggering loss of life and destruction inside Tigray, the war has eroded Abiy's aggressive development plans and derailed the country's economic trajectory, experts say. Ethiopia's economy had grown at nearly 10% for the last decade, before slowing in 2020, dragged down by a combination of the COVID-19 pandemic, debt and conflict. The war has also drained national coffers, decimated a large slice of the country's industry and eroded its reputation among foreign investors and financial institutions. From where I sit, I think there was a monumental failure of analysis. Internationally, Rashid Abdi, a Kenya-based analyst and researcher who specializes in the Horn of Africa, said, including himself in that group. I think people failed to apprehend the complex nature of Ethiopia's transition, especially they failed to appreciate also the complex side of Abiy, that he was not all the sunny, smiling guy. That beneath was a much more calculating, and even Machiavellian figure, who eventually will, I think, push the country towards a much more dangerous path.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe